Okay. Thank you for that, Maria. Oh, she's just coming back. You forgot to say something?
Yeah.
Oh.
You're much taller than I am.
No. It's still not right. Okay, so the fun's over. Now it's all going to get really serious, because my books are very, very, very serious. Thanks for coming to listen to me talk, and it's wonderful to see so many people here. What I generally do when I'm giving a talk is first of all to sort of see who's actually read me. Who has not read me? Maybe that's the best thing to ask. Oh, we have someone over there. Oh, we have a couple of people. Not many. Okay, that's good news. Because often I start talking about my book, because I come here with that, sort of childish naivety that an author possesses. Instantly convinced, of course, everyone has read all my books and loves them. And I can turn up at talks where no one has read me at all, and I start going on about the sort of plots that I write, which is kind of confusing. And there's this sea of uncomprehending faces, and I suddenly realise, and I ask for a show of hands, and I realise that in fact I've just been talking nonsense as far as anyone's concerned. Anyway, so most people have read me. That's excellent news. Someone asked me a question the other day, and I do like questions. So we've got about 3/4 of an hour. I do like questions. So we've probably got about 10 or 15 minutes at the end to ask questions. So if you can think of any really good questions to ask, like where do you get your ideas from? Because that's one that I very rarely get asked. In fact, in fact, it's actually the only question there is when it comes to fiction writing. So think up some good questions. I did have a really good question the other day where someone said, have you ever read a book a winner? Right, which is an interesting question because fantasy book a winners perhaps not the same sort of literature. And I said actually, because I thought about this, and I said yes, actually I have, because years ago I worked in the film industry and I was a gopher on a film called The Ploughman's Lunch in about 1982, and the guy who wrote the screenplay was Ian McEwan, right? So I remember actually making him coffee, because that's what I used to do in those days, make coffee and do photocopying. That was about it, and running around a bit. And when you've made someone coffee and you're standing there, and he's this like amazing sort of literary figure, and I'm standing there, and there's this empty sort of time, and I thought, well, I better say something. But I couldn't think of anything intelligent to say, and nothing has changed since then. So I said, tell me, Mr. McEwan, when you write, do you write, aggressive scenes with like a 4B pencil, and then the very sort of light, delicate stuff with a 2H? And he looks at me like this, which I think meant you're an idiot. So that was when I read the book A Winner, because I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was thinking, Jasper, you're an idiot. When am I going to see some biscuits? So that's the only time I've read a book A Winner. Now, I will mention also that the book, hopefully that you're about to read, what is it called? One of Our Thursdays Missing, is actually, curiously enough, it's one of the only books that actually has a title that actually means what's in the book, which is quite nice, actually. Give you a little hint about what's going on. There is a little bit of a competition running, which is on my website, which is a sleuthing competition. Now, this is quite fun, this. I did it for Shades of Grey. And I put in a little sort of, a few sort of puzzles that I dropped into the book. And then there are questions on my website, and if you can answer them, and they're fiendishly difficult, then you can win the 2 millionth copy of my book. So, ooh, so really exciting. So anyway, so that's it. So I do like questions. Where do I get my ideas? Right, let's talk a little bit about the book. One of Our Thursdays is Missing. Now, as the title would suggest, One of Our Thursdays is indeed missing. But I'll just go back a tiny bit, because the interesting thing about writing the sort of books that I do is that I seem to be able to find no end to the elasticity of my readership's mind, which is brilliant, really, because then I can write really whatever I want. And if I sort of explain away why I've changed something, and then it's changed, everything's all right, and it seems to work. But I was rather sort of slightly annoyed. The thing about writing is once you've written it, it's kind of out there and you can't really change it. So I constantly want to change things, which is kind of annoying, and maybe I can do it when ebooks are completely taken over, and we don't have any paper at all. And then I could just want to change something, I just sort of change it on the ebook. In fact, I had this rather nice idea that, in fact, I would start knocking on people's doors and saying, hello, my name's Jasper Fforde, and I'm the author. I wonder if you have any Thursday Next books. And they'd go, oh, I think we've got a few. And then I said, could I just change something? And they'd be going, yeah, I think so, but we're kind of in the middle of dinner. And I go, well, it won't take a moment. And I go in and I get their books and I start changing things. And then I say thank you, and I say I'm just in the area doing this. And then I go out again. It's just like, not a nice image, isn't it? Very strange. But anyway, the point about it is that when I first started writing the Thursday Next books, I created this idea of the book world. Now, I like the idea of the book world. This is where all the characters exist within the written world, that we only see the one side of it, you know, a very just sort of little sort of bit on the edge of all these characters performing, and all the props and the settings and everything like that, whilst behind it's like complete chaos, as all these characters and everything try to make the books that we know and love stay as the author intended, you know, really intensive and powerful and everything. Now, the book world, as it exists up until this one, TN6 as we call it, really sort of was about a sort of great library, and you pick out a book and you read it and you magically transport it into the book. So I thought actually I could have a bit more fun with this. So I thought, why don't I remake the book world into a sort of geographic model? And there is in fact this map in the book, which is quite fun, where everyone's turning to it, it's quite good, isn't it? Which explains more about how Fiction Island looks. So if, for instance, you wanted to go from horror all the way across to sort of political drama, you'd get a train and you'd go through human drama, and then you'd end up at political drama over the other side. But if there was a sort of snarl up on the Hemingway overpass, then you might have to go through comedy, which is a bit boring, really, because comedy isn't very funny when you get up close. But the problem was, you see, that I'd already developed the book as without this remade book world. But I thought, well, I'm the author and I can do what I want. And for the most part, most readers are eminently flexible, as I've said. So what I did was I actually remade the book world in a sort of more geographical way. And what I'll do is I'll read a little section from the book now, which perhaps explains what the new, improved book world actually looks like. So maybe I should give you a little bit of background to the book as well. One of the Thursday Next books I enjoyed a lot was TN3, Weller's Plot. And this was with Thursday, very much arriving in the book world and not sure of it, and it's all very strange and remarkable, and she has to be sort of have her hand held and taken through the book world by Miss Havisham, as you recall. I kind of like Thursday like that, and I was wanting to get back to that kind of sort of storytelling and that kind of Thursday. But Thursday, it's 15 years on now, and she's a sort of major, sort of heroic figure in the book world. There's nothing really she can't do. So I thought, well, let's introduce a written Thursday. So I thought of the idea that Thursday is actually missing, and the one person who really cares about trying to find her is actually the written Thursday Next. Now, anyone who hasn't read my books at this point will, of course, be wondering what the hell's going on here. But I kind of like the idea of having a written Thursday and a real Thursday. And the written Thursday is not quite as good as the real Thursday, because she is, after all, a written Thursday. And, of course, no author can really make a real person as real as they are in real life. So she has a few issues of her own. So the book is essentially about Thursday trying to find herself. But not herself, another self. It's so simple, isn't it? It's wonderful. But anyway, the first chapter is really about the book world being remade. And this is when written Thursday, the book world has been shut down for 9 minutes and then rebuilt again. And this is when written Thursday is witnessing the new book world for the first time. I stood up and noticed for the first time that my living room seemed that little bit more realistic. The colours were subtler, and the walls had an increased level of texture. More interestingly, the room seemed to be brighter, and there was light coming in through the windows. It was real light too, the sort that cast shadows, and not the pretend stuff we were used to. I grasped the handle, opened the front door, and stepped outside. The empty interbook nothing that had separated the novels and genres had been replaced by fields, hills, rivers, trees, and forests. And all around me, the countryside opened out into a series of expansive vistas with a welcome novelty of distance. We were now in the southeast corner of an island, perhaps 100 miles by 50, and bounded on all sides by the Tex Sea, which had been elevated to grade 4 picturesque status by the addition of an azure hue and a soft billowing motion that made the text shimmer in the breeze. As I looked around, I realised that whoever had remade the book world had considered practicalities as much as aesthetics. Unlike the real world, which is inconveniently located on the outside of a sphere, the new book world was anchored on the inside of a sphere, thus ensuring that horizons worked in the opposite way to those in the real world. Further objects were higher in the visual plane than nearer ones. From anywhere in the book world, it was possible to view anywhere else. I noticed too that we were not alone. Stuck on the inside of the sphere were hundreds of other islands very similar to our own, and each a haven for a category of literature therein. About 10 degrees up, so for fiction, I could see our nearest neighbour, artistic criticism. It was an exceptionally beautiful island, yet deeply troubled, confused, and suffused with a blanket layer of almost impenetrable bullshit. Beyond that were psychology, philately, and software manuals. But the brightest and biggest archipelago I could see upon the closed sea was the scattered group of genres that made up non-fiction. They were positioned right on the other side of the inner globe, and so were almost directly overhead. On one side of the island, the cliffs of irrationality were slowly being eroded away, while on the opposite shore, the sands of science were slowly reclaiming salt marsh from the sea. While I stared upwards, open-mouthed, a steady stream of books moved in an endless, multi-layered crisscross high in the sky. But these weren't books of the small paper and leather variety that one might find in the outland. These were the collected settings of the books, all bolted together and connected by a series of walkways and supporting beams, cables, and struts. They didn't look so much like books, in fact, but more like a series of spiky lumps. While some one-room dramas were no bigger than a double-decker bus and zipped across the sky, others moved slowly enough for us to wave at the occupants, who waved back. As we stood watching our new world, the master copy of Dr. Zhivago passed overhead, blotting out the light and covering us in a light dusting of snow. "What do you think?" asked Whitby. "Oh, brave new book world," I whispered as I gave him a hug, "that has such stories in it." So there you go, a little bit of fun there. So Thursday is missing, and the problem with the book world and jurisfiction is very understaffed. There's only about 7 or 8 jurisfiction agents, as we know, as Commander Bradshaw states, here in fiction we have over 250 million titles. That's just one island in a book world, 228 different and very different literary groupings. Thursday Next could be anywhere from the Urdu translation of Wuthering Heights to the guarantee card on a 1965 Sunbeam Mixmaster. So you can see the problem of trying to find Thursday, and essentially they've given up. They just don't have the manpower or the assets to do so. This is a bit unfortunate because, of course, there's all sorts of skullduggery going on in the book world. Racy novel, the rogue genre of racy novel, which you may remember was introduced in the previous book, has been sort of squabbling again with feminism and next door and women's fiction, and then outdated ecclesiastical dogma on the other side. A bit of a problem there. So there are some peace talks going on, or they're due on Friday, and of course Thursday really needs to be at the peace talks, but it's a bit of a problem. We also have another interesting ideas that I've developed with the new book world. That if you are a character in a book, and this is what this book sort of actually looks at, what it's like to be a character in a book, and being multiple reads, of course. If you're fantastically skilled, you could be read, simultaneously by 20, 30,000 people. But if you're not a very confident book actor, you would perhaps manage about 8 before you started panicking. And if you became totally panicked and started getting, tongue-tied and everything like that, there would be only one thing you could do, and that is press the snooze button. And what this does, it actually reverses the throughput sluices on the imaginary transference engines, and what that does is actually put the reader to sleep. And you just basically press the snooze, and they fall asleep and stop reading you, and that's an emergency. But unfortunately, what happens if you press the snooze button, then somewhere a kitten dies in the book. So obviously it's the last resort. Very rarely used. We have a metaphor shortage in the book world, which is a big problem because the quantities of metaphor, you actually have to mine it. They've been using metaphor so much now because fiction has been spread so rapidly since imagination was deregulated in the 50s. And I think the peak production of metaphor has actually long passed, so they're actually trying to find new ways of finding metaphor. the one way you can do it, of course, is put it in the large metaphor collider. Where what you do is you take a depleted simile and you accelerate it in a circular 18-mile track up to 0.95 the speed of absurd. And then you collide it with indisputable fact, and then look at the sub-comprehension particles that fly off it. It's all fairly logical stuff, I have to say. The Written Thursday occasionally works for JADE, which is a jurisfiction accident investigation division. Because we've talked about the books which fly overhead as they move from one genre to another, or they move from a very popular genre to the sort of suburbia of remainderhood, and bits fall off them quite often, which because they're not stuck on very well. So she has to investigate things like that. She also has, because she's a first-person narrative, she has a stand-in called Carmine, who comes to her as a rather sort of slightly sort of lacking in confidence, stand-in, if you like. Again, problems about being fictional. She has a designated love interest, because everyone has to have a designated love interest in fiction. His name is Whitby Jet. Not very interesting, he doesn't have a backstory. If having no backstory was his backstory, that would be interesting, but it isn't, because he doesn't have a backstory. And a good backstory you'd kill for, really. Unfortunately, Whitby, and I don't give too much away by saying this, there is a bit of a problem with backstories, because a friend of Whitby's has a backstory, which was about setting fire to a busload of nuns, which of course is not the sort of backstory you want to have. But this friend of Whitby asked, because he wanted to go on a date with this young lady he met, and of course you can't go on a date when you've got that kind of backstory. So he said to Whitby, would you actually mind just looking after my backstory for the weekend? It's fine, you should stay indoors and you'll have the burden of the guilt, obviously. But you can just sit indoors and no one will see you, so you'll be fine. So that's what he did. He thought, do a friend a favour and everything. Then this guy ran off, so he's still got the backstory, which obviously is a bit worrying, because when you carry on someone else's backstory, you've still got it, whether you did it or not. So clearly Whitby has some issues to deal with regarding the busload of nuns who were taking orphaned puppies to an orphanage. So big problems that he has to deal with. Another character I've introduced is a clockwork butler called Sprocket. I like the idea of clockwork men, automata, or automaton, I don't know what you call it. But the great thing about Sprocket, of course, is that I can then look at what it's like to be clockwork, and to be sort of clockwork sentience. I'll read you a little section here. This is when Thursday brings Sprocket back to the series, and of course all the characters in the series are all characters that we know from the previous series. It is complex, isn't it? It does make sense, believe me. And this is when Bowden, who appears earlier in the season, this is Bowden asking about Sprocket, the butler. So, who's your friend? Said Bowden. Sprocket, I replied. My butler. I didn't know you needed a butler, said Bowden. Everyone needs a butler. And I think that's true, actually. And if there are any true statements in my books, I think that should be one, along with There Shall Be Spoons, which is another great I enjoy a lot. I didn't know you needed a butler, said Bowden. Everyone needs a butler. He was going to be stoned, so I took him with me. He was actually going to be stoned. She found him in a conspiracy. And of course they thought that he was, trying to take over the world or something, so they were going to stone him to death, but she rescued him. He was going to be stoned, so I took him with me. What do cog-based life forms get stoned with? Asked Bowden in an impertinent manner. Vegetable oil? Actually, sir, intoned Sprocket, it's sewing machine lubricant for a mild tipple. Many feel that the exuberant effects of 3-in-1 are worth pursuing, although I have never partaken myself. For those that have hit rock bottom, where life has become nothing more than a semi-conscious slide from one partial winding to the next, it's WD-40. Oh, said Bowden, who had been put firmly in his place by Sprocket's forthrightness. I see. Said Acheron, peering at Sprocket's data play with great interest. Are you the Duplex 6? 5, sir. The 6's release has been delayed. A series of mainspring failures put beta testing back several months, and now I hear the 6 has pressure compensation issues on the primary ethical escapement module. What does that mean? I have to admit I'm not entirely sure, sir. The main problem with clockwork sentience is that we can never understand the level of our own complexity, for to do so would require an even greater level of complexity. At present, we can deal with day-to-day maintenance issues, but all we can ever know for sure is that we function, we tick, therefore we are. So, I rather like Sprocket. He's rather nice, actually. Does anyone know how WD-40 got its name? Do you have WD-40 here? You do, yeah. Yeah, water disbursement. Yeah, and it was the 40th experiment they did, apparently. That's how. You see what you learn at Jasper Fforde? So we've also got the men in plaid, who I enjoy a great deal. We don't actually have plaid, we call it tartan over where we are. Is it the same thing, plaid and tartan? Pretty much, yeah. Men in plaid, which I like. When the book world was remade, this other tier of sort of secret police were introduced, so I quite enjoy those. As I said, the large metaphor collider. And of course, the other thing that I rather enjoyed playing in this book is, in the Thursday books, we have a real person travelling into fiction and everything that they deal with there. And in this book, I thought, well, I can take a fictional person and put them in the real world and see how complicated they find there. They find it there. And in fact, it's actually far more complicated and difficult to understand the real world than it is the fictional world. The fictional world is easy to understand. We have a little bit of advice here. Professor Plum, who always appears whenever there's something technical involved in any of the books. It's not that one, hang on, it's this one here. Yeah, it assists Written Thursday in getting into the real world, because they're trying to find out where Thursday could possibly be, and they think that a trip to the real world might help. So this is Professor Plum giving Thursday a little bit of advice on what she might find in the real world. Do you have any advice? I asked. I've never been there myself, confessed Plum, but they say if you can handle the first 10 minutes, you're good for the whole 12 hours. If you can't hack it, then just find a quiet wardrobe in which to hide until the free return brings you back here. I found his comments disconcerting. What is there that one might not be able to handle? Professor Plum made a clicky noise with his tongue. It's highly disorderly, he explained. Not like here. There is no easily definable plot, and you can run yourself ragged wondering what the significance can be of a chance encounter. You'll also find, for the most part, there is no shorthand to the narrative, so everything happens in a long and painfully drawn-out sequence. Apparently, the talk can be confusing. Generally, people just say the first thing that comes into their heads. Is it as bad as they say it is? I've heard it's worse. Here in the book world, we say what we need to be said for the story to proceed. Out there, well, you can discount at least 80% of chat as just meaningless drivel. I never thought the percentage was that high. In some individuals, it can be as high as 92%. The people to listen to are the ones who don't say very much. Oh, there are fun things too, said Plum, sensing my disappointment. You'll get used to it in the end, but if you go out there accepting that 75% of talk is utter twaddle and 85% of people's lives are spent dithering around, you won't go far wrong. But above all, don't be annoyed or distracted when random things happen for absolutely no purpose. There's always a purpose, I said, amused by the notion of utter pointlessness, even if you don't understand what it is until much later. That's the big difference between here and there, said Plum. When things happen after a randomly pointless event, all that follows is simply unintended consequences, not a coherent narrative thrust that propels the story forward. I rolled the idea of unintended consequences around in my head. Nope, I said finally, you've got me on that one. It confused me too, admitted Plum, but that's the real world for you. A brutal and beautiful place, run for the most part on passions, fads, incentives, and mathematics. A lot of mathematics. So you go, a little bit more there. Let's have a few questions, and then I can go off on a tangent with all kinds of other silly ideas. So anyone want to ask a question? Get the ball rolling. Yes? Which cover do I like better? They're both the same. Oh, the American, do I prefer the American cover or the English cover? Well, covers are very like children, that you love them all equally. I don't know, covers are a dark art, actually, and no one really knows what is right and what isn't. And the thing is, you can't actually then rerun the world with a different cover and see how it turns out, so we'll never know for sure. And also, the other thing about covers is if a book fails utterly, you can always blame the people who designed the covers, which is a good out, really, to be honest. And if it sells fantastically well, then you could just sort of admit that the cover might have had something to do with it. So people who design covers are really on a sort of losing streak right from the very beginning. I think this is brilliant. We're about to, which is really annoying for everybody apart from us, because you then will hopefully buy all the books again. We're going to redo all the paperbacks with this sort of cover. We're using this kind of design, which is quite nice, really, the little wraparound thing like that. I like this a lot, but then I also like the UK ones, and it's good to have sort of a bit different here and there. So I can't really choose between them, I'm afraid. But I will say, actually, and I hope none of my British publishers are here, but the nursery crime covers in the US are just perfect, absolutely spot on. And I think those are actually slightly better than the UK ones. So anyway, yeah. Another question. Right, just say.
So how does a character in the fictional world account for translation and like different editions of translation?
Right, so translations. How does a fictional person deal with translations? Well, this is an interesting thing, and I thought, well, the book world, as I've created it, right, actually doesn't allow for translation rights or anything like that. So there must be multiple book worlds, which you can't actually see. They're actually in another plane, totally. But then I was also toying with the idea, and it's something I haven't actually played with yet, although I've alluded to it, is that every year there is the Book World Conference, and that all the characters will all come to this conference and they'll discuss things, and that's why some books are sort of rubbish to read, because everyone's off, at the conference. But you would get, would be quite a fun scene to have all the different Miss Havishams, right, from all the different countries, all trying to decide which is the right way to be Miss Havisham.
But even like, so like Don Quixote has like several different English translations, so that's
Yeah.
kind of what I was thinking.
I know it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something I'm not sure, actually. But I do like actually winding up French people quite often when I go over there, because I always say, things like, are you enjoying, all the British authors in translation? And they go, well, yes, most of them. I say, like, Victor Hugo, for instance, who was born in London. And they go, no, he was French. And they say, no, he's French. And I go, no, didn't you know that? Oh, that your government lies to you. And they say, oh yes, very funny. And then I sort of go through all the great French authors and claim that they're all English. Annoying the French is what we enjoy doing. It's like a natural pastime. And they like to annoy us by having like good food and cheese, which we don't have, sadly. Not like they do anyway. Another question. Let's go. Yes.
Well, speaking of cheese,
Yeah.
since you've been in the States, what was the first cheese you reached for?
Well, the first cheese that I reached for in the States, I don't think I've eaten any cheese.
It's legal here, It
It is it?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, it's legal where we are, but you just have to pay a lot of duty on it. So that's the problem. No, the whole. I like the idea of cheese, because it's such a silly idea, and I think it's fun. But at the time I was writing it, we'd had the strike. The people who deliver the oil and petrol to our forecourts had gone on strike, and it wasn't anything that anyone could control because they were freelance, and they went right, we're on strike, we're fed up. And quickly get people from Shell and oil, come in and talk to me. And this was Tony Blair when he was around in Esso, and get all these people to come and talk. And they said, well, it's nothing to do with us. These are the tanker drivers, so it's like a wildcat strike. Anyway, so we then, every now and again, the British get a little bit upset about paying lots of money for fuel, because we are essentially paying about $8 a gallon. Although our cars do go like 9 times as far, which kind of moves it around. But I do see you've got smart cars now, so all is not lost. So at the time, we like to grumble every now and again, but in a very polite way, the British, we might shake our heads like that. Or we might do a really strong glare like that. See how aggressive that is? That's fighting talk. Or, and this is the most rudest thing of all, you could do an audible tut, okay, like this. That's like serious. The next step would be like murder. So we got like that, and we did a few audible tuts about the high fuel prices. For all high fuel prices, like that. What should we do? I don't know. Let's have a cup of tea. Anyway, so Tony Blair came and said to us, well, the reason we play so much duty is in fact that because got the NHS and that we have to pay for that, which is kind of true. And I thought, well, this is interesting. Why not have duty instead of on fuel, let's have it on something else, and why not cheese? So in the book, there is a sequence where someone comes on from the government and said, if you selfishly demand cheap cheese, then this poor little old lady will have to go without her hip replacement. So that's where the cheese thing comes from. And the way my mind works with a kind of the logical progression of ideas, and I do take silly ideas and then run them till they're, really until they're absolutely, run ragged and, raw, is to actually then think, well, okay, high duty of cheese. What would happen in the real world if we had high duty on cheese? And you think, well, the illegality would start moving in. It's like a prohibition on cheese. You'd get like cheap cheese, and of course the Welsh Socialist Republic next door, which are constantly trying to destabilise the English, economy, would be trying to sneak cut-price cheese across the market, and basically ruin the lives of well-meaning English people. So then Thursday becomes involved in the Stilton Easter and all that sort of stuff. So it's all a bit of fun, really. But, So let's go over down here.
When you decide to incorporate an existing fictional character, do you then go back and reread their book to get a feel for them? Or
Yeah, when I attack, when I steal, homage, sorry, it's called homage, a particular book, do I go back and reread it? Yes, I do. The first few books, I think up until about book 3, I was still running with books that I knew really well. I knew Jane Eyre pretty well, so I could actually, play with that quite easily. Not easily, but I mean it was easier. And then I kind of ran out of books that I knew, and then I had to start, rereading them and stuff like that. And then I suddenly think I must do something with Wuthering Heights because somebody has to, because it's just like like hideous. I'm sorry to anyone here who's a huge Wuthering Heights fan. It would have been great if she'd written another book, wouldn't it? It would have been like a sort of comedy or a slasher. I don't know anything. Self-help, who knows? And they needed it. But the Brontes kept on dying a lot. Mr. Bronte certainly had a black suit. So I was thinking, Wuthering Heights, what am I going to do with it? So I thought, well, I hated it when I was a teenager, and I probably hate it now, so I reread it, and I got really angry, And it has 7 first-person narratives, right, which is really, really annoying. She obviously couldn't do anything else. And it was when I was getting really angry about this, I thought, well, that is it. That is what I want to do with this book. And I couldn't use it in a big way, I felt. But what Wuthering Heights really needed was a rage counselling session inside the book, run by Miss Havisham, and where they'd all sort of sit down and get together in a little circle of trust, in that kind of 90s psychobabble way, and let's talk about our rage, let's talk about our anger, and of course it's all about Heathcliff, and even the characters who died giving birth to other characters, all sort of sitting together and discussing, and they're all and it's doing quite well, and they're all kind of really opening up and everything, and then Heathcliff arrives, and they all sort of clam up instantly, like that. But he arrives like a film star with all his people and his entourage. So that's what I kind of did with Wuthering Heights. But I just sort of worked through it. It's quite interesting, and I think, well, I'll use Vanity Fair or something like that. And what can I do? So I read it, and it's actually really enjoyable because I read classics that I haven't read for a long time or at all. So the research phase of the book can actually be huge amount of fun. Yeah. Let's go right over there. Yeah, a young lady here.
Well, I kind of found a weird flaw that you didn't think out. It's because fairy tale detectives were written before or published before Jane the Eyre Affair. Because in the Eyre Affair, I think they were watching a TV show called Jack Sprat with Judy's Casebook.
Yeah.
And then in Well of Lost Plots, which was written after Eyre Affair,
Yeah.
you say fairy tale detective is created from Caversham Heights. So, what's going on?
Okay, did you kind of get all that? It was a sequence of events. I put in the Eyre Affair, I put they're watching Jack Sprat's casebook, and then later on I published the Jack Sprat books afterwards. And what's going on? Yeah, it's interesting. The thing was that actually I wrote the nursery crime series first, but they were published afterwards.
Oh, really?
And when I was wanting to put something in, what they were watching on the television, I just thought I'd put in Jack Sprat's casebook. So I just did, because I knew I already had a book that there was that title. And you kind of, I added the if you look very carefully and you read the Well of Lost Plots, it actually explains, in the Well of Lost Plots, there is the backstory of how Nursery Crime 1, the Big Over Easy, was actually brought into being. And there's a sort of the backstory of that running underneath the book. And in the end, they basically, the Nursery Crime series is like a safe haven for nursery rhyme characters. It's part of, I think they're all on strike because they were fed up doing endless sort of, rhyming couplets. So that's where they end up, and they're really on a sort of character exchange program, and that's what the Nursery Crime series is. So quite why they were watching it on television, I've no idea. It just have to be a little sort of fly in amber of a sort of little perhaps an idea that I had that I didn't follow up. But again, it's like the book world, remaking the book world. I could later on, I could explain it, and then I could go, ha, to you. But, no, you got me. Damn. Yeah. Anyway, yes, just here and then.
Well, it kind of applies to this. Are there other worlds? Is there a television world? Is there a radio world? Is that maybe how this can all work out?
Yeah, are there other worlds, like a radio world, a TV world? Yes, probably, but someone else has got to deal with that. It is complicated, and I think when you really start, analysing it and asking all sorts of interesting questions, then you'd actually have to explain it away in a sort of 5, 6, 7-dimensional world. It's like the translation ones, quite where they are, we're not sure, but they're somewhere, but I don't really know. So I can't really answer that question actually. But I think someone else did. It's like someone says, if they could make a movie about the sort of Thursday Next idea, and instead of having books travelling into films, and I go, well, yeah, I think that could work quite well. It'd be a nightmare for copyright. But you could, I'm sure you could do it, but that's for someone else. That's not for me. I do one of these about books.
Just before we can do 2 more.
Oh, 2 more. Okay, so just there behind there. Yeah.
I was wondering, with the entire Thursday Next series, are we reading the written Thursday Next portrayal of the real Thursday Next? Or
Yes.
I was just wondering, what do you think?
Well, what I think is that the Thursday books in Thursday's world are not the ones that you're reading, because the point is that Thursday reluctantly agreed for her life story to be told, and she never mentioned the book world, and we do touch on this in one of our Thursdays. Okay. So that was the idea I was having. But as you can see throughout, even once you've read this, and if you read the First Among Sequels, you can see that the Thursday books are becoming closer to the Thursday books that we know. Okay. So I'm sort of trying to drag us back to the point where the Thursday books in Thursday's world are actually the same books that we read, but it's quite hard, but we're working towards it. Okay, so one more. Yes, just.
I heard you mention the name Carmine. Is that a nod to East Carmine and Shades of Grey? Are you subconsciously sad that you can't get the second book out so that I can read it?
Oh, right, okay, yeah. Yes, sorry about not bringing Shades of Grey out sooner. Carmine, the name Carmine is at a nod to Carmine in Shades of Grey. East Carmine, in fact. No, it isn't actually. It was originally Carmine O'Kipper, as she's known, a sort of red herring sort of name. Was originally Scarlett O'Kipper, which I kind of like, and it's sort of Scarlett O'Hara kind of thing. But then I realised I actually knew 2 people called Scarlett. And when you use people's names and you say it's totally not you, they can go, yeah, like that in a weird kind of way. So I thought, actually, I'll just play it safe and change the name. So I did, and that's why it's Carmine. But as for Shades of Grey, we're right for next year, we've got a standalone book. The year after that, we're going to try and do Shades of Grey, right, which is, let's think, so 2012 next year, so 2013 Shades of Grey, Nursery Crime 3, 2014, are we now? That seems to be where we're going. But Shades of Grey is an interesting one because this is unlike all my other books.
I think about it more at night
Yeah.
than any other book.
Excellent, that's what we want to hear. Thinking about my books at night, keeping you awake at night. Yeah, excellent, good. Because if you think about most of the Thursday books and the Nursery Crime books, they're all about essentially me reaching into your head and then tweaking something that you learnt about in your childhood, and that's the fun. And you're doing the work, actually, and I get the money, which is... but Shades of Grey was, I thought, well, I've got to do something else, and I've got to pretend to be a novelist. How hard can it be? And it's actually, it is quite hard, actually. So it took a little bit longer. But interestingly, when it came out, it wasn't really read or bought. It wasn't a huge success, and the least bought of any of my books. But just recently, we've seen that change. And the emails I get now, and talks like this, and people saying to me, when are we going to get Shades of Grey 2? Which is wonderful for me, because I did really enjoy it, and it's the book I'm sort of most proud of as a standalone sort of little fiction. Well, thank you very much. But we will get Shades of Grey 2, hopefully not next year, the year after. But anyway.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Barnes & Noble, I'd like to formally ask Jasper Fforde, will you come back?
Well, yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming once again. If you'd like to get a book signed, please remain in your seats. We're going to get Mr. Fforde settled behind the signing desk, and then we are going to go row by row. Once again, row by row, from the front rows going all the way across. Thank you.